to the Pinocchio Project. This is your host, Mitch Friedman, and I'm joined today by the namesake of our project. I'm joined by Pinocchio himself. This book is typically over my right shoulder. There's another smaller version here over my left shoulder and on your right. But what I thought I'd do today is actually put Pinocchio, the story, and the wooden figure desiring to become human to the worldview test, at least as to the first, and I would argue most important question, essential question in a worldview construct. So how about story time with Mitch? It's not nighttime, but if you listen or watch at night, maybe even choosing to do so for this episode, and you want to put your kids to sleep, then just bring them on in. What I discovered over the course of raising our kids at story time is that there's something about my voice that being exposed to it over a short period of time induces sluggishness, drowsiness, and then sleep. So if you're having trouble getting your kids to sleep, you might want to either bring them in, choose to bring them in for this episode, or archive this episode for use at a later date. So I'm going to grab some coffee. You know, one thing I recognize the Pinocchio Project, dear Pinocchio Project consumers, is that now that we've gone to video, I make a lot of comments that I make on the assumption that you're watching me. But probably the majority of you are still just listening to me, which is fine. I just need to train myself out of making comments that assume that you can see what's going on here. Like, for example, in our St. Patrick's Day Rolling Over in the Clover episode last week, I commented on what I was wearing, that green and embedded black thread hoodie with the lime green ties. And maybe those of you who are listening were going, what? Yeah, I don't, Marco. No, he's like speaking like I can see that. So I'm trying to do my best to train myself into the proper posture and communication style that's accessible equally to a video and an audio consumption. So anyway, story time with Mitch. Worldview, Pinocchio style. One night, long, long ago, the evening stars shone down across the dark sky. Its beams formed a shimmering pathway to a tiny village, whose humble little homes lay deep in sleep. Only one house still had a light burning in the window, and that was the workshop of Geppetto, the kindly old woodcarver. Geppetto had stayed up to finish a merry-faced little puppet he was carving. Now he held the puppet up. "Look, Figaro! Look, Cleo!" he chuckled. "Isn't Pinocchio almost like a real boy?" The only answer was a snore. Figaro had his soft kitten nose folded into his paws, and Cleo lay sleeping in her goldfish bowl. "Sleepy heads," the old woodcarver sighed. Climbing creakily into bed, he mumbled, "I wish you really were a real boy, Pinocchio." Somebody overheard Geppetto's wish, and that was Cricket, Jiminy Cricket. All evening, Jiminy had hidden behind the hearth. He had seen how kind and gentle the woodcarver was, and he felt sorry because he knew the lonely old man's wish could never come true. Suddenly, a shimmering light filled the room. Jiminy gasped. Out of the light stepped a beautiful lady dressed in shining blue. She raised her wand and said, "Wake, Pinocchio, skip and run. Good Geppetto needs a son." Pinocchio blinked his eyes and raised his wooden arms. "I can move," he cried. "I'm a real boy." "No," the blue fairy said sadly. "You have life, but to become a real boy, you must prove yourself brave, truthful, and unselfish." So what we have here in the opening section, the opening pages, the once upon a time portion of the Pinocchio story is a proposed answer to the first and most essential worldview question. If you remember from all of our learnings, all of our teachings, every image bearer, every human being, and this is a biblical worldview, every human being is made in the image of God and therefore his image bearer. Every one of us has this philosophical, moral, ethical, existential need to answer like 4 basic questions, and they're all at work at the same time. The first and most important question is, what does it mean to be human? And I just want to park there for a minute. Actually, I want to come back to it. I'm going to park it and come back to it. The first and most important worldview question is, what does it mean to be human? And that answer was just offered here in Pinocchio. Brave, truthful, and unselfish. Those are characteristics offered in order for Pinocchio to move from just an animated wood carving to a real boy or a human. So the second worldview question is, what's wrong with this place? And we'll see in the story of Pinocchio, it's just a great illustration. And I'm not going to read it all today. I want to focus on the what does it mean to be human question. But the what's wrong with this place, the second essential question in a worldview, is illustrated throughout Pinocchio's story because he continues to choose behavior that is contrary to brave, truthful, and unselfish on his way to understanding what will be the happily ever after. So we have the once upon a time, and then we have the what's wrong with this place. We have Pinocchio's origin, and now his problem is he's not human, and he has to grind toward the characteristics that will make him human. And then the third essential worldview question is, what can be done to fix what's wrong? And we see it embedded in the answer to what Pinocchio needs to make himself human. Brave, truthful, and unselfish. And then finally, where is this story going? The fourth worldview question is, where is this story going? What is history? Is it a loop? Is it a void? Or is it a completion of a story or a narrative that has a predetermined ending? Does it have what we call a telos or a maturing of the story? And the more I work with worldview personally, and the more I package it for teaching and training, the more and more I realize that the first question in a worldview construct is the most important, because out of those answers to the question, what does it mean to be human, come necessarily the options for answering the question of what's wrong with the world, what can be done to fix it, and that's the salvation question. How can we be saved from what's wrong? And then finally, where is all this going? So it's a very, I think, comforting foundation point in a worldview definition to recognize the significance and the primacy of the first worldview question and its answers. If you've ever read the original novel, Pinocchio, not this Walt Disney version, which has some, and at this time, Disney is still producing what I would call redemptive and morally sincere as to the image of God storylines and ethical dilemmas that result in redemptive endings. But this children's book is not the first Pinocchio. If you were to read the original novel, and you can get it for free online, you'll see just the dark journey that Pinocchio goes on in his quest to become fully human, which I would offer as a noble quest for all of us. And you're saying, Mitch, I am fully human. I live, I breathe, I eat, I sleep. I have contacts and relationships. Well, those are sort of the physical realities, but from a biblical worldview perspective, there are deeper understandings of our design, our purpose, and the requirements and responsibilities that we have given to us in order to enjoy a flourishing human existence. And so I just want to camp for a minute, and maybe this will help refresh you or maybe introduce you if you're new to the Pinocchio Project and you haven't accessed our season 1 and the first probably 8 to 10 episodes of season 1, where we did some basic worldview training, Worldview 101, then this can be a help and maybe an introduction for you to get a solid foundation on evaluating ideas that are coming at you every day that promise human flourishing. Because the way that we vet ideas that promise human flourishing is we build a biblical framework around these 4 questions. What does it mean to be human? What's wrong with this place? What can be done to fix it? That's the salvation question. And where is all this going? We process through the biblical text all the answers to these questions, and all the answers are there. And ladies and gentlemen of the viewing and listening audience, every human being is asking and answering these questions, whether or not from a biblical framework. And my observation for Christians is the less biblically literate you are, the less you will be now secure and satisfied, clear and confident and courageous in what it means to live according to the best flourishing outcomes. The less literate in the Bible you are, the less secure you'll be in your faith, and the less opportunity to process ideas that promise flourishing appropriately. And the result is confusion. The church, largely in the West, is confused about really beginning in the first basic question: what does it mean to be human? All kind of alternatives are being offered. And I think it's appropriate in our story of Pinocchio, even in the Disney version, to talk about the satisfying characteristics of what it means to be human, as brave, truthful, and unselfish. Those are great ethical and moral character traits. But there's more than that. In reality, if you're listening to this podcast or watching on YouTube and you have children in the house still and they're of school age, they are being assaulted by, I would call deviant, variant, derivative definitions, deviant from the biblical text and a proper understanding of what it means to be human. And those ideas are promising flourishing to your kids. But more and more as those outcomes are being seen, the ideas that promise flourishing that have nothing to do with a biblical understanding of what it means to be human and to hold true to those responsibilities, more and more outcomes we're seeing are despair, discouragement, and even acts of desperation that result in death. And I'm not saying that just to this is not provocative, this is factual. And any functional worldview has to be factual in its construct. And I'm saying a whole lot here, but I think I just want to spend a few minutes in either refreshing or maybe reinforcing or maybe introducing you to the necessity, if you're interested in building a biblical worldview, the necessity of developing the answer to this first worldview question well, so that you can process ideas about answering this question of what it means to be human through this proper understanding from a biblical, I would say, reality-based perspective. So that's also one of the components of a functional worldview, is that it must align with reality and not be contradictory. It must be logical, non-contradictory. So let's talk about this first and most important answer to this first and most important worldview question: what does it mean to be human? There are basically 2 ends of the spectrum. You can answer from the perspective of this end of the spectrum, this end of the continuum, that my answer to the question, what does it mean to be human, must begin with, how did I get here? What is literally my origin? So this end of the spectrum would be a reliance on an intelligent designer commitment, a prior commitment or presupposition that my origin is rooted in intelligence, an intelligent designer. And that's not necessarily required only for a Christian or a biblical worldview. There are all kinds of other systems that are rooted in answering this first question of what does it mean to be human, with the presupposition and prior commitment to that I or we are the result of intelligent design. There was a mind that had a plan and then the potency or the power to employ or deploy that plan through that intelligence and that plan to design who and what I am in my physical, in my emotional, and, if you will, in my soulish or spiritual nature as well. So that's this end of the continuum, an intelligent designer motif and the commitment to that reality as my origin. On this end of the spectrum is a Darwinian or naturalist or materialist perspective, which holds as a presupposition that there is nothing intelligent in my design. I am merely a product of evolutionary forces, I'm going to go ahead and tip my hand. There is so much that's illogical and contradictory and not factual and not livable in this motif, and yet it is still the most popular understanding, quote unquote, of origin that's in your zip code. And so on this end of the spectrum lives this idea that I am simply the product of random chance over time, undirected, and somehow what is undirected became, quote, fully formed, unquote, in this unit of processes that's now speaking to you sensibly. So that on its face is contradictory, but I just want to focus on the first and most important question in a worldview is, what does it mean to be human? And then the first and necessary next step is answering in a subcategory, how did I get here? How did humans get here? So two options on each end of the pole: intelligent design or undirected random chance over time, in parentheses now, accidental. Intelligent and purposeful, undirected and accidental. Those are the two ends of the pole. And so under that origin sub-question comes a few other questions. What does it mean to be human as to my design? Do I have a specific design? And in an intelligent designer construct, I do have a design that is now specific to my purposes, my responsibilities. In the naturalistic or accidental origin story, since there is no intelligence that, quote unquote, designs me, then I can claim no personal design or any design that is common to every other human being, something that we hold in common. There is no quote unquote human nature as to design. And so you see where this is going. And that's why this is the most important worldview question. Intelligent design as my origin or accidental, undirected as my origin. In design, an intelligent designer provides me with design. In an accidental, undirected origin, there can be no design. And then the next sub-question after design is purpose. What is the purpose of a human being? And an intelligent design motif, there can be a purpose based on my design. If I'm going to build a tool, for example, to drive a nail, I'm going to design it to look like a hammer. That's a kind of a crude and I would say abridged way to describe what we understand as design now compartmentalized, if you will, for example, in male and female. Why is a male designed as a male is designed? And why is a female designed as she is designed? And I would offer so that he and she can individually and then together live out a purpose. And from Genesis 1 and 2, we see that design and purpose was so that they could be fruitful and fill the earth. So a male in his design and a female in her design come together and now can propagate, now can bear fruit, have children. But over here in a accidental motif, it just so happens that, wow, there's this one with this equipment and there's this one with this equipment that came to be out of these accidental processes. And hey, look what we can do. So maybe we should do it, or maybe we shouldn't. And that speaks to now responsibilities. So in an intelligent designer motif, I'm now going to subtly move into a biblical worldview category where the intelligent designer is the creator God. Genesis 1:1, in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth. And then in all the days of creation comes to his crown jewel of creation, and that is male and female in design and now in purpose to fill the earth and have dominion over it. That's where our responsibilities come in. And so on the intelligent designer, creator, God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, if you will, we have design, we have purpose, and we have responsibilities given to us by our creator, by our designer, and therefore as our transcendent authority. He is the boss. So in an intelligent designer, and now a Christian understanding of creator God, we are given the equipment, the purpose for the equipment, and the responsibilities to be his representatives in this earth that he has created for us. And he is the ultimate authority, but we have authority as well. We are the sub-authority. We are the sub-regents of God's creation. We've been called to fill it, to cultivate it, and to have dominion over it, which is stewardship, to care for it in a way that maximizes flourishing. On the other end of the spectrum, in an accidental origin or undirected origin, there can be no purpose because there is no design, because there is no designer. And therefore, there are no set responsibilities that I have to any intelligent designer. I have no responsibilities as to any other human being, because none of that can be shown as being transcendent and applicable to all. And therefore, by default, there is no authority other than me, the autonomos. And you've heard me use that term, the law unto myself. And when I read Pinocchio, both in Disney and in its original darker form, much darker, I see Pinocchio struggle. And this is a great metaphor for learning to grow into the image of God. It really is. I see Pinocchio struggling with the autonomos default. He wants to get what he wants through all kinds of means. He wants to avoid consequences for his actions. He wants to make sure his appetite and desire succeed. He wants his agenda to be proven out overall. And he finds himself again and again in the opposite or the contrary characteristics that he was given on the front end. Remember, brave, truthful, and unselfish? Well, he continues throughout the majority of the story as he grinds to this resolution. He shows himself as not brave, but cowardly, not truthful, but dishonest. And that's where we get the whole motif of your nose is growing when you're dishonest, and everybody sees it. And then instead of being selfless, he is most of the time shown as absolutely selfish. And those are the characteristics of a human being that we see living in the second worldview question, what's wrong with this place? And so Pinocchio shows that from a biblical perspective, the worldview answer to what's wrong with this place is sin. And since sin lives in me, then I am what's wrong with this place. And so I'm not going to go through the whole construct. I just wanted to focus just for a few minutes on refreshing or reinforcing or maybe introducing you to the primacy, which is, first principles, best practices of building a biblical worldview is to answer well the question, what does it mean to be human? So let me just say this concisely and then close. In a biblical worldview, the most important question to ask and answer is, and it's true in every worldview, but we're answering it biblically, the most important question to answer well is, what does it mean to be human? And so that means I recognize that I am made intentionally and specifically and lovingly by a creator. So he by default is the authority, because out of his mind came me. He didn't come out of my mind. I was in his mind, and I have been created. And that's true for every one of you. Psalm 139, for example, as our recognition. Jeremiah chapter 1. He knows what he's doing when he's knitting us together. So out of his mind, I come. That has all kind of implications. The first implication means design. The second implication means purpose. The third implication is responsibility. And the fourth overall recognition is authority. God is the ultimate authority. If anyone is the autonomos, the law unto himself, it is God, because his law covers every aspect and every operation in the universe. He holds all things together. And he is the only law that's reliable. And he's given me authority to act under his authority for the benefit of creation, which includes my flourishing. When I act under God's authority, with whatever authority he's given me under that umbrella, the result is flourishing. And this is so important. The more and more I learn and grow in God's grand story, the Bible, and move through the movements of creation, fall, redemption, and restoration, the more and more I've realized that the way I answer this first question of what does it mean to be human, and stay true to my design, my purpose, my responsibilities, and submit to the authority that he is overall, the more I become, as Pinocchio desired to be, fully human and flourishing. So you know what happened to Pinocchio in the end. All things worked out well, but it was a grind for that boy. He continued to live in cowardice, insincerity, and absolute selfishness. And by the grace of whatever powers it be in Disney's story, he was transformed ultimately. And that's our goal, that we are transformed like a butterfly leaving a chrysalis into the image of God through the power of his Spirit and our commitment to do what Jesus says is best for us. Jesus said in Luke 6, "Why do you call me Lord, Lord, and do not do what I say?" That's a really good question. And so I don't want to remain in a less fully formed wooden posture, Pinocchio style. I want to be fully realized into the image of Christ based on my obedience and submission to his authority, and living according to my design, purpose, and carrying out my responsibilities. That's the flourishing way to be human. For Pinocchio and the Pinocchio Project, this is Mitch Friedman signing off.